called 4 in, 4 out. So I'm going to mimic it here on the NFL with AJL. Every year, now in the NFL, there's 14 teams that make the playoffs, 7 from one side, 7 from the other. It used to be 6, but now they brought in another playoff spot, a couple seasons ago. On average, there are 4 teams that made the playoffs that will miss them the following year, and there are 4 teams that miss the playoffs that will make them the following year. So let's play 4 in, 4 out. I'm going to start with the teams that made the playoffs last year but will miss the playoffs this year. The first one on this list is going to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Not only have we seen the horrible practice footage of the quarterbacks not being able to hit any of their throws and just overall not really looking great in the what's it called? Just overall not necessarily looking great in practice. They do still have a good roster, but Todd Bowles isn't going to be my favorite coach with what this roster's set up with right now, defensive minded head coach. I still love Mike Evans. I still love Chris Godwin. You'd like to see more at the quarterback and running back position as well, but the O-line was pretty solid when you go back and look at the teams that had taken the most sacks in the NFL from last year. And just with the Saints getting better this year, with the Lions potentially being able to take a leap, if the Vikings stick around, some people are believing in the Packers a lot. We don't know what the NFC is going to play out to be, but I believe other teams did get much better than the Bucs this year. So that is going to be a team that made the playoffs but will miss. Next, we have the Giants. This was a tough one. When I was looking at how the AFC is stacked to the NFC, which it's really ridiculous how stacked the AFC is to the NFC. I think we all know that. I'm gonna get into a little segment about that on a later episode. I really can't believe how lopsided it is. But with the Giants making but now missing, as I was looking at this segment, I almost backed out because I was like, dang, can the Giants really miss the playoffs knowing how weak the NFC is next year? I mean, yes, maybe the Commanders can pump in, and knock them out, kind of alluding to the next part here. I do have the Saints coming in and making the playoffs. The teams that miss that will make, but we'll get to that next segment in a little bit. So I almost couldn't have even put the Giants in here as a team that made the playoffs but will miss. But I did end up going with it. Look, I have the respect for Brian Daboll, definitely coach of the year. He earned Daniel Jones the contract. Daniel Jones came into his own under Brian Daboll. They bring in Darren Waller. They bring in Jalen Hyatt. They have Saquon Barkley, who stayed healthy last year. So that was a very good outing from the Giants to make us all have that faith in them. But again, I believe the Saints did get better. I believe the Saints are a better team. And no, not just because I'm a fan, but they are a better team than the Giants here. I do believe that the Lions or maybe even the Commanders could be a team. I'm not dropping those teams in the segment. Could be a team that prevents the Giants from making the playoffs. Next team I have is the Miami Dolphins. And the thing with Miami, if Tua's healthy, this team could run for best offense in the league. They could score 28 to 35 points a game if they really wanted to, with the likes of Devon Achane, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, if they actually do pull off Dalvin Cook, which is another topic we'll get into later in the show, Dalvin Cook landing spots. But the Dolphins missing the playoffs, if Tua's healthy, like I said, they can run for 12 to 14 wins, be one of the best offenses in the league because they have all that. Mike McDaniel was very impressive. I was very impressed by Mike McDaniel in his rookie year as a head coach. Just mending Tua, mentoring Tua, just the way that they really implemented Tyreek Hill, and he goes on to have a career year. I hate that Mike Gesicki, I believe Mike Gesicki is still Gesicki's with the Patriots. Let me not even goop. There's been so much movement in this offseason. Hated that Gesicki had to go. But with how stacked the AFC is, I believe a team that could take their place could be the Jets. I believe the Broncos or also the Browns are going to be an AFC team that can jump in and take a spot from the Miami Dolphins. Dolphins also have a very tough schedule this year. And if Tua's not healthy, it's going to be a very bad football team. I understand for the fans out there, Skylar Thompson was very competitive against the Buffalo Bills in that playoff matchup. And we were all, pretty shocked at how that played out for Miami. But it's really riding on Tua's health. I have a good feeling he's not going to have as many health issues this year. Hopefully the concussions can hold back. But if that does start to creep in, the Miami Dolphins might not be a great football team. And another team that made the playoffs last year, but will miss the playoffs this year, as much as I hate to say, because I really do like this team. It is going to be the Los Angeles Chargers. And of course, the Los Angeles Chargers are good enough to make the playoffs. There's no doubt about that. But again, with the AFC getting stacked up, we need they need Keenan Allen to stay healthy. They need Austin Eckler, who thankfully is coming back to stay healthy. They draft Quentin Johnston, who is a good wide receiver. I'm not the biggest fan of him. I really didn't believe he was a first round talent, but with the scarcity of size and his combination of speed in this draft, I understand that's why he was taken that high. The Chargers could very well make the playoffs. The Dolphins could very well make the playoffs. The Giants could very well make the playoffs. 3 teams that I put in here. The Bucks, I am sure, will not. Maybe they could win the NFC South, but I really think that's either the Falcons or the Saints division to take. You already know I'm taking the Saints. Who dat nation, baby? Giants, Dolphins, and Chargers, along with the Bucks, will be the 4 teams that made the playoffs last year, but will miss the playoffs this year. Now, NFL teams that missed the playoffs last year, but will make the playoffs this year. The New York Jets, they pick up Aaron Rodgers. This might be a shock to a lot of you, but I believe Aaron Rodgers is good enough to get the Jets into the playoffs. As much as I've sat up here and said that the Jets should not walk, they should run away from Aaron Rodgers, I did believe that was true because invest in your future. You do give up a big haul for him, and you really just could have used that capital to try to pull off Lamar Jackson or try to pull off some of these other quarterbacks that were moving around. But they made the move. It is what it is. And Aaron Rodgers seems to be, gelling into the offense well. He seems to definitely be doing well at OTAs. I know he hasn't been at some OTAs because of the ankle, and that's been kind of concerning. But when you look at how he is going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the AFC, one of the more stable quarterbacks in the AFC, over some of the fringe ones out there, like the Tuas that I was just mentioning. Maybe he's more stable than Lamar Jackson in terms of passing the football and, being able to stay healthy. And that's not even a slight on Lamar, but I think Aaron Rodgers with the Jets is a lot more beneficial, maybe than I was willing to let on, but that other people are willing to admit as well. Another team that missed the playoffs that will make the New Orleans Saints, my New Orleans Saints, the one and only New Orleans Saints. Who dat nation? It's like I just can't say the Saints without saying who dat nation. If you say New Orleans, or Louisiana or who dat, I got to say who dat nation. I'm sorry, guys. But yes, the New Orleans Saints, they trade for Derek Carr. They have Chris Olave there. Michael Thomas does resign. Not necessarily a fan of it. Alvin Kamara, we don't know what's going to happen with him. The pending suspension is coming. More than likely, he is going to get suspended. The Saints should dig into a running back because that shouldn't punch them in the mouth. They don't need to let it punch them in the mouth. But I can see the Falcons taking, or not the Falcons, I can see the Saints making the playoffs over the Bucks, being the only team after winning that division, in that division, to make the playoffs. The Giants falling out is a very good possibility. Of course, the Bucks are going to fall out, like I mentioned. So the Saints will swoop in to take one of those playoff spots. The Denver Broncos, a team that missed the playoffs, that will make the playoffs next year. The Denver Broncos bring in Sean Payton of the formerly mentioned, or of the aforementioned, I believe that's how you would say it, New Orleans Saints. And Sean Payton did a lot for the Saints. We saw what he did over the 15 years, winning them the Super Bowl, elevating Drew Brees, amazing draft classes. And now the Saints have been struggling to find themselves ever since. But with the Denver Broncos, Russell Wilson and Sean Payton have been saying it all offseason. They are going to bring something different out of each other because of what they both bring to the table. The team has had a great offseason. Sean Payton has spent money. The draft was okay. And there's been a lot of camaraderie around this team. And I'm not saying Russell Wilson is going to immediately go back to 42 touchdowns and 6 interceptions with 5,200 yards. I'm not saying that's an exact stat line from Russ. And I'm not saying he's going to go back to that, but it will be more stable. It will be more calculated. It will be more efficient football. And the last team that missed the playoffs, but will make this year, the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns with Deshaun Watson, the Cleveland Browns with Nick Chubb, and the Cleveland Browns with Amari Cooper and Kevin Stefanski. The Browns not having Deshaun Watson last year was major, was absolutely major. We know that he was not available for them. The quarterback position was very questionable. They were unaware of what was actually going to unfold. Of course, they did have Jacoby Brissett in there. I believe so. Let me make sure that was accurate before I get butchered on a live stream. Believe so. No, Washington Commanders. I believe he went to the Commanders, though. So I'm going to trust my gut there and say that he was with the Browns. But the Browns didn't have their star quarterback, Deshaun Watson, who I believe can still be a top 5 quarterback in this league, who I believe is better than Justin Herbert at his peak, who I believe is better than Lamar Jackson at his peak, who I believe is better than Joe Burrow at his peak. I know we haven't seen Deshaun Watson in a few years, but I believe that part of his game is still inside of him, and this will be a season to where he brings it back to life. Again, I don't comment on his off-field things. I'm not a guy that's out here massively advocating for Deshaun Watson. I recognize talent. I get on the show and acknowledge it. And I believe he's going to do great things with the Browns this year, having that full 17 games under his belt, knowing the offseason that they had. So there's the 4 in, 4 out for the 2023 NFL season. The 4 teams that made the playoffs that will miss next year are the Bucs, Giants, Dolphins, and Chargers. And the 4 teams that missed the playoffs last year but will make the playoffs next year are the New York Jets, my New Orleans Saints, the Denver Broncos, and the Cleveland Browns.